There we go. Hey, how are y'all doing tonight? Let's just start over. Just pretend, like bow your heads, pretend Jake's praying, and then he says amen. All right, hey everybody, y'all having a good night tonight? It's a little bit better. If we haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name's Austin Walker, and I'm the student pastor here, and I am so jacked that y'all are here. We're starting a new series that you might be able to tell by the picture, the creepy, foreboding figure behind me, called Nameless. Everybody say Nameless. Let's try one more time. Everybody say Nameless. And really this series that we're talking about, we're looking at some spots in scripture where we see someone who we really know their name. They have this role to play, but we don't really know their name. We don't know much about them because I think we have this inner drive as people to be known. I think we have this inner drumbeat in our soul where we want to be known. And I don't mean like every moment you want somebody being like, yeah, but what's your soul secret? Like not that level. Like when I go to Starbucks or I'm on a plane, I don't want to be known. Like I just want to exist. But even the like staunchest introvert, to some extent, you want to be known. It's how we're wired. And the crazy thing is, it's also our greatest fear, being known. I've been reading this book called The Like Switch, and it's written by this guy. He's an FBI special agent. He's been training agents, and his specialty is training agents to recruit foreign assets to spy on their home country. Like that is what this dude does. He doesn't do that. He's so good at it. He trains people how to do that. And so he has this system worked out. He said over decades of working with the FBI and recruiting assets, we realized that there are some things that people have in common. And he boiled it down to what he calls the friendship formula. This has nothing to do with the Bible, but it's really, really interesting and it goes to our wiring. He says friendship, initiating a relationship, is the combination of 4 different factors: frequency, duration, proximity, and intensity. Those 4 things: frequency, duration, proximity, intensity. And so he says, if you want to strengthen a relationship, regardless of where it is, you need to raise one of those factors. And so if you've got a friend let's say, for our ladies in here, there's a guy in 3rd block, and he's super cute, but he doesn't know who I am. And we don't have any other class together, but I know at 2:15, he is always gonna drink at this water fountain. So what if I happen to be there? You're not raising the intensity, but you're raising the frequency of which you interact with that person, slowly like recruiting that guy. And some of you are like, what? It's okay, it could work in your favor. But you work those 4 things. The opposite is true as well. If there's somebody where you're like, they are not getting the hint, like I don't want to be around this person, you just lower those elements as well. And now I'm afraid that I have just very quickly trained a room full of sociopaths, but that's just kind of, it's true. And so he opens up by telling this story of a guy who I think he said is like codename Charlie or something, but he said, he's a dignitary for a foreign country. He had access to information that we wanted. We knew his routine on Tuesdays and we needed him to spy on his own country that he has grown up in. The very first thing that the special agent who is assigned to recruit that guy says to this guy named Charlie is, "Hi Charlie, my name is so-and-so, so-and-so. I'm a special agent with the US government and we need you to spy on your country. Are you in?" And the dude said, "Yeah." Like, can you imagine just walking up to that person? But what built that was for 5 months, this special agent knew proximity, duration, intensity, frequency. And so he would be at a cafe starting off at the opening of this guy's Tuesday routine. And slowly through nonverbal cues and stuff, communicated that he was a safe person, but that they recognized each other. And then they said, once that was safe, it was time to up the frequency. So not only would he see him Tuesday at the cafe, he also would position himself Thursday afternoon as the guy was coming home. And once that was safe, then it was duration. Then the guy would slowly walk on the other side of the street for a week and a week and a week and a week, following the guy. And over time, they had the frequency, proximity, and duration down, but no intensity. But they were so marinated in those three things that when it was time to up the intensity of that relationship by having a conversation, the special agent was already in that guy's mind a safe person because of months of priming the pump that the dude didn't have to have a cover or anything. He straight up said, I'm with the US government. We want you to spy on your country. Are you in? And his actual response was, yes, I was wondering what took you so long to ask. That's nuts. But the reason those four things work, the reason those four things, regardless of culture, regardless of context, regardless of time or anything like that, the reason those work is because we all have in us this desire to be known. We have this immediate thing where we instantly filter people that says, are they safe or are they not safe? Because if they're safe, we want to be known. And so for these next few weeks, as we're in this series, Nameless, we're addressing this inner drive to be known, to have an impact, to have influence with the people around us. Because I think we have this idea that influence only comes with notoriety. I think we have this idea that for me to make a difference, more people have to know me. Or for me to really make an impact right now, nobody even cares that I exist. And we have all of these lies that we believe about ourselves because we want to be known and because we want to be valued. And what we see in scripture is time and time again, these nameless people who society might not even have cared about, who changed the world. And so in Mark chapter 5, that's where we're gonna be tonight. We're just gonna walk through a handful of verses and look at this story that's a little weird. Y'all that know me by now know that's not unusual, but it's a weird story. So the first 5 verses of Mark 5. So they, being the disciples, arrived at the other side of the lake in the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus climbed out of the boat, a man possessed by an evil spirit came out of the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the burial caves and could no longer be restrained, even with a chain. Whenever he was put into chains and shackles, as he often was, he snapped the chains from his wrists and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Day and night, he wandered along the burial caves and in the hills and howling and cutting himself with sharp stones. Like I said, this is gonna get a little weird. That's a strange thing. And so we have Jesus coming, and in chapter 4, the end of chapter 4, it's the whole there's a storm, what are we gonna do? And Jesus is chill. And then the storm chills. So they're getting out of the boat, and this guy, they meet this insane, village crazy dude, this urban legend. It says, evil spirit. Some of your translations, if you're following along, may say an unclean spirit. And Mark, as he's telling us this story, he gives us a really clear picture of this guy. And I want to unpack that a little bit so you know where this guy is coming from. He has an unclean spirit. Now for Jewish people, and we don't know if necessarily this guy was a Jew or not, but for Jewish people, and Mark was writing to them, the worst thing that you could possibly be was unclean. Because if you were unclean, you were not allowed or able to be in the presence of God or his people. And so depending on what it was that you did that made you unclean, that determined how long you were pushed out of community, had to stay outside of your city, and what purification process you had to go through so that you could come back to your home, come back to your family. And so we see right off the bat, this dude is unclean. His very core of who he is unclean. Well, we see that he doesn't really have a name. He has an unclean spirit, and he's living in burial tombs. In Numbers, there's a passage that says if you come in contact with a dead body, the purification requirement of that is a 7-day process. So you touch a dead body, 7 days, you're not allowed to be around anybody because you're unclean. By the time Jesus is walking around, the Pharisees, the religious leaders have said, if you touch anything involving death at all, burial rags, anything, you are unclean and have to go through that. And this dude is living in tombs. This guy is living in that and will never, ever be redeemed. He will never be able to go through purification processes because the clock starts over every single night. He is unclean, living in tombs. We're gonna see this translation in the end says he goes to the 10 cities. Some translations say the Decapolis. It's a Gentile, which means not Jewish city. So he's not even living with Jewish people. What we see here is the epitome of a man who has nothing redeeming about him. There is nothing of value. There is nothing of worth. There is nothing safe. It says that they come out and try and chain him, and even that doesn't hold him back. This is the walking caricature, like the prime epitome example of someone who has no value and no worth. Society doesn't want him a part of their city. They so deeply dislike and are afraid of this guy that they try and chain him in caves so he can't come back. And we hear that, we're like, that is inhumane. Like if you found out that someone that you knew was chaining somebody in the forest so that they wouldn't come into town, that is like world-class level serial killer. So like that is a big deal. And this whole city's in on it because he's the crazy man that lives in the caves. He's not safe. He's not okay to be around any people with us. He's too dangerous for society and too wicked for his own good. If there's ever anyone that is too far gone, it's this guy. And not in a literal sense, but I read that and I can't help but wonder how many people in this room or in our schools or in our neighborhoods hear that, and whether it's true or not, the way that they feel is, that's me. No one wants to be around me. No one wants to know me. No one wants to include me. I'm not good enough for anybody. I'm not good enough to be invited to anything. I find out about stuff on social media after it happens with people that I thought were my friends. I wonder how many of us, not that we are so evil and wicked that we can't even be chained, but I wonder how many of us would say, yeah, I don't really feel good enough. I don't really feel like anybody cares about me. I feel like if I was just living out in the caves in the wilderness, no one would know any different or care. And there may be some of you in here, you're like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. How could anyone feel like that? And if you've never experienced that, what I want you to hear is you are very likely a part of the other end of this problem causing that. Not every time. And for those of you that feel isolated and alone, I'm not saying all the people in here who haven't felt that are the reason you feel that way, but what I'm saying is this is a much more important issue for us to think about than just to say, I don't feel alone, ignore. Because many of us feel this to some extent, to some level, and I would argue most of us in here to some percentile feel this, but even if we don't, you might be part of the problem. But even if you're not part of the problem, you can still be part of the solution. You can still be part of making it right. And so we have this guy who's not valued by anyone around. And then in verses 6 and 7, we see this. When Jesus was still some distance away, the man saw him, ran to meet him, bowed down before him. With a shriek, he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." Now, what we're about to find out is this man was demon possessed. And so it's just really interesting that Jesus shows up, hasn't done anything, and immediately this man possessed by demons, the demons recognize who Jesus is coming into their territory. And then verses 8 and 9. For Jesus had already said to the spirit, "Come out of that man, you evil spirit." And Jesus demanded, "What is your name?" And they replied, "My name is Legion, because there are many of us inside this man." Now, legion in that day is a military term for a unit within the Roman army that would have been 5,600 men. Now, we have no way to know whether there were 5,600 demons possessing this guy or not. Like, that's just what we have. But it's important to note that it is a military term. It's a military term that this demon uses. And then, why is that important? Verse 10. The evil spirits begged him again and again not to send them to some distant place. Again and again, they begged him. Some translations say they pleaded for mercy. Don't miss verse 10. Don't overlook it. Because we have Jesus, the King of Kings, coming into this place, this unclean, dangerous place. And we have this battalion, this legion of the enemy who has had free reign over this space. And in comes the leader of their enemy forces, Jesus, the King of Kings. And their response is not to take a posture of aggression. Their response is not to take a posture of fighting or resistance or defense. Immediately, their posture before Jesus is to fall at his feet and beg for mercy. 5,600 enemy troops begging for mercy from the one King of Kings. And I think the thing that we can't escape from Mark 5:10 is that even the enemy knows that the battle has been lost. The war is already decided. They are on limited time. And so instead of trying to push their way in and conquer the enemy's king, they simply fall to his feet. They beg for mercy. So what happens? The next few verses, 11 through 13, there happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. Send us to the pigs, the spirits begged. Let us enter them. So Jesus gave them permission. The evil spirits came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the entire herd of about 2,000 pigs plunged down the steep hillside into the lake and drowned in the water. Pretty weird still. Now, here's a little bit of irony. I don't know if this is important. I think it may just be like poetic justice. We're talking about a lot of things that are unclean. Another thing that's unclean for Jewish people are pigs. Like they can't have, 2,000 pigs is a lot of bacon. It's a lot of ham, it's a lot of good eating, but for Jewish people, you can't do that. And so Jesus takes the unclean spirits, puts them in unclean animals, and they go and they just run off a cliff. I don't know, I don't think there's anything significant there. I just think it's kind of funny. But think about this, 2,000 pigs, y'all. That's a lot of pigs. That is babe times 2,000 of babes. That is somebody's means of income. That is not even a small herd. That is a terrifying amount of pigs that somebody owns. And they just run off a cliff. Could you imagine being that dude? We find out what he does in a second, but that's awful. I'm just gonna look this way because that laugh is awesome, but. Now listen, because we're gonna try and take a turn to something serious here as best we can. This is this dude's livelihood. Whoever is this herdsman, this is his means of income. This is how he supports his family. And now all of a sudden, they're gone. And we could really, commentators even argue that is inhumane for Jesus to do. If pigs are his creation, that's an inhumane thing to do. But here's what I think Jesus is saying, and this is so important for us. I don't want you to miss this. I think Jesus is showing, and this is a dumb thing to have to say, but it's so important. This guy's soul is more important than this guy's stuff. Don't miss this. This guy's soul is more important than that guy's stuff. This guy matters more than 2,000 pigs. We can hear him, we're like, yeah, whatever, of course. But how often do we live as if that is not true? How often do we live as if my stuff matters more than that person's soul? How often do I live as if my reputation matters more than their experience and their joy? How often do I say, I could help this person, but it would cost me too much? I could reach out and befriend this person. I could bring this person in. I could help them, but it will cost me too much. Students, I think we look at it and we're like, of course those pigs aren't worth more than that guy, but I think too often the way that we live our lives says that my stuff matters more than these souls, and I'm not willing to change it. And Jesus says, at all costs, we will bring freedom to the people that need it. Your stuff does not matter more than his soul. And then in verse 14, it says, this poor dude. The herdsmen fled into the nearby town and the surrounding countryside, spreading the news as they ran. People rushed out to see what happened. Obviously, think about from this guy's perspective. It says he's on a hillside up away from this, so there's been this huge storm. He's in this really scenic area, hillside. He's got a couple thousand pigs hanging out with his buddies. and the storm develops over the lake, and it is the worst storm you've ever seen. And then all of a sudden it disappears, and you see this boat coming up in the water, and you're like, that boat did not have a good time. I don't know what's happening. And then you see the boat hit the beach and brush up against it, and this guy, this man from the boat gets off and lands, and then you see out of the corner of your peripheral vision the legend and the terror of the forest, the cave-dwelling man. And you know he is strong enough to break through chains. You know he is too dangerous to be around people. He is the reason that you have so many people taking care of your herd, because he is a terror. And you see this guy out of the woods start sprinting through the trees towards this poor dude who just got out of a boat. And you're sitting there going like, dude, you gotta watch this. Boat dude's about to get wrecked, right? Like this dude breaks chains, like literally, and he is full sprint toward this guy who's probably about to vomit from seasickness. And this is like, we're also like, this is gonna be on the internet. This is gonna be famous. He's gonna make $1 bajillion. Like he's about to clothesline this dude. It's gonna be ugly. Let's watch. And the monster of the forest comes sprinting out, and you're waiting on it, and instead he gets to this man who just got off the boat and falls to his face in a posture of submission, and you can't hear what they say, and they exchange words, and then the man looks around and sees you up on the hillside and points. And the man on the boat, he turns and he looks. He turns back, he says, you don't know what's happening, and then all of a sudden, pigs be crazy. All of a sudden, hundreds and hundreds of your pigs start rutting and oinking and pig noising and just like sprint. And the whole time, this man from the boat is looking up, staring at you, and there's something a little bit different in his gaze. You can't quite realize it, but all your pigs are gone. You don't have anything to watch now. You're like, we gotta go, dude. Like this is big. We gotta tell it. So they run off and they go tell people about what just happened. And listen, verse 16 and 17. Then those who had seen what happened told the others about the demon-possessed man and the pigs. Imagine just trying to tell that story. And the crowd began pleading with Jesus to go away and leave them alone. They get to Jesus. Oh, we skipped a verse 15. That's an important verse. Y'all don't let me skip 15. Come on now. I'm just kidding. It's not your fault. 15. Pretend I didn't just read those other verses. A crowd soon gathered around Jesus, and they saw the man who'd been possessed by the legion of demons. He was sitting there fully clothed, perfectly sane, and they were all afraid. So the town comes out, the village people come out to see what just happened, to try and find out what is going on with the man of the forest, the caveman, and this man from the boat. And they show up, and the dude for years who they have tried to chain in a cave is sitting next to Jesus at the feet of Jesus, fully clothed, fully sane, healthy, and happy. That is the impact of someone fully submitted to Jesus, begging for his help. He is no longer the person he was, but is still the person he has always been. He's been made new. He is no longer the urban legend. He is now the person that he was made to be in the first place. Jesus restores him back to who he was supposed to be. But as we just read, we're going to read again in 16 and 17, that doesn't exactly go the way you think it would go. Those who'd seen what had happened told the others about the demon-possessed man and the pigs. And then verse 17, the crowd began pleading with Jesus to go away and leave them alone. And we read that, and we're like, why would you tell Jesus to go? He just fixed this guy. But think about it from their perspective. This man you have spent years warning your kids about because he is a danger. He can't be chained. He can't be trusted. He can't be contained. He is a power that we have no control over. And this random stranger comes in and subdues that power. Not only is it true that people love to be liked, but another thing that I think that we see is true all the time is if there is something that we do not understand and something that we do not control, it is something that we do not want. They didn't understand how this man conquered the other power. All they knew is if he is powerful enough or has enough sorcery or black magic or theological, like what deity in him to subdue this guy who we have no control over, that means we have no way of controlling this guy. And that is dangerous. If we don't understand it and we can't control it, we don't want it. And that's what we see all the time. When Jesus changes lives, it changes who we are and it changes what we're passionate about and excited about. And the people around us hear that and they don't understand it and they can't control it. And so they just don't want anything to do with it. We have this resistance to things that are more powerful than us. We don't know what to do. So they ask him to leave. Verse 18, maybe the most understandable verse in this whole thing. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. He just wanted to go be with Jesus. Think about it. This guy, for years, has been overlooked, has been pushed away, has been neglected, has been tortured, has been chained, has been cast out of his family. Imagine what it was like when the change was starting to happen. And his family didn't want him anymore. His friends didn't trust him anymore. He had no place to go, no place to call home. He goes out and is living in a tomb. And every so often, the people he used to live with and live around come out and try and chain him in a tomb. This guy has spent years being ostracized, years being cast out. And then there's a guy who sees him. This guy, Jesus, all he does, the very first is sees this man and doesn't back away. Sees this guy and isn't disgusted, isn't frustrated, isn't afraid. So there's power. There's power in seeing people. There's power in looking at people and seeing them as people. So all this dude wants to do is go with the guy who saw him. All this guy wants to do is to go with the guy who saw that he is a person. And then the verse that at first doesn't make sense. 19, Jesus said, no. Go home to your family and tell them everything the Lord has done for you and how merciful he has been. Jesus has restored this guy's mental faculties. He's restored his spiritual life. He has restored him physically. It says he's even fully clothed. Jesus has been restoring this guy, but he's not done yet. What we see in that verse is Jesus passionately restores his relationships and his purpose. He says, go back and see your family. Yes, you could come with me, but you need to go back to your community, back to your family, and be restored with those relationships. And students, when Jesus changes our life, we don't get to retreat away from where we've been. We don't get to pull ourselves away from our family and our friends or anything like that. Jesus sends us back, changed and new, to restore those relationships. But not only the relational restoration, we see purpose given. This guy has spent unknown amounts of time living in a cave, just surviving. And now Jesus says, you have value. You have a purpose. You have a calling. Your story was your burden, but now it is going to be their blessing. It was the burden that you carried and the pain that you had and the brokenness that you had and the heartache that you had. It was your burden, but now I have changed you, redeemed you, made you whole. I'm sending you back, and now your burden is going to be their blessing. And we see that in verse 20 as it ends this story. So the man started off to visit the 10 towns of that region and began to proclaim the great things Jesus had done. Everyone was amazed at what he told them. An entire community hears about Jesus because Jesus restores his relationships and restores his purpose. And so what does that mean for us in 2019? Jesus sees us and restores us. Jesus sees us and restores us. He sees us where we are. regardless of our filth, regardless of our brokenness, regardless of the things that we're trying to hide from him, regardless of the things that we're not proud of, the things that we wish nobody knew, he sees every bit of us. And for those of you in here who would say, I don't feel like my friends even see me, my parents even see me, my teachers even see me, he sees you anyway. It does not matter what anyone else thinks, because Jesus, the King of Kings, the one who a legion of the enemies fell at his feet, he sees you and everything about you. He doesn't judge us. He doesn't back away. He doesn't expect us to fix ourselves before we fall at his feet. And then he restores us. He makes us whole. It's this pursuit of Jesus from this man that changes his life. Jesus cast out the demons. He fixed and restored the isolation, the loneliness, the hurt, and he is the only one who can. No amount of chains that we put ourselves in can bind us and fix us. Our life is not a matter of fixing the brokenness and the pain and the evilness in us. It is not fixing it and binding it. It is being restored by Jesus, and he is the only one that can. No amount of struggle, no amount of pain, no amount of hurt or anything else will ever fix the things that only Jesus can restore. We all have, as the band comes up, those moments of namelessness where we feel deep down that we're not valued, we're not seen, we're not included. And what I desperately want you to know is, regardless of your story, of how nameless you do or don't feel, Jesus gives us purpose, he sees us, and he restores us. This summer, our junior high pastor had a cookout at his house, like a game night, and 30 junior high students showed up. I don't even know if we may have pictures from that, but there were about 30 that showed up, hanging out, having a good time. And as the night was going on, one of the dudes went inside, and we can go ahead and take that picture down. One of the dudes went inside to refill his drink or something like that, and realized there was one kid sitting inside just playing with Court's dog, just by himself. You're like, oh, that's weird. So he went out and got his friends, and some of his friends came inside, and those friends spent the rest of the night inside hanging out with that dude who's all by himself. Now I tell you that story because that's how easy it is. I'm not asking you to go change the world. I'll ask that of you other nights. I'm asking you to see one person. I'm not asking you to go revolutionize your school. I'm asking you to see one classmate that you don't know. Now, that junior high dude that was in Court's living room hanging out, that one interaction may make no impact on his life. But those guys that came in and sought him out may also be in his wedding. We don't know the rest of the story. And so what does it look like for us to see people? Because for those of us in here that would say that we love Jesus and we follow Jesus, we are called to be about the things that our King is about. And Jesus sees people and restores people. So what are we doing to be about that same thing? What are we doing to see people and to restore people and to lead them to the one who can free them? Let's pray. Lord, thank you that you do see us and that you restore us. Thank you that regardless of the brokenness that we have, the pain that we have, the evil in our hearts, the hurt, the abuse, the history, the secrets that no one else knows, that you see us. And that we run towards you knowing that you should run away, that you could strike us down, that you could end it right there. That when we run towards you with all of our baggage and all of our pain and fall at your feet, that we can expect mercy because you know who we are. So Jesus, I just pray for any students in here that do feel nameless, that feel broken, that feel hurt, that feel hopeless. God, I pray that tonight, God, that they fall at your feet and that they realize the impact of you seeing us, restoring us and giving us purpose and making us whole. For those of us in here who would say that we follow you, God, my hope and my prayer is that we would be about the things that you're about, and that as we leave tonight, we would see people in a way that maybe we haven't before, and that we would realize their soul is worth more than our stuff. It's your name we pray.